Natasha,
Yes.
how old are you?
I regretfully must say I am going to be 83 next month.
You are such a hottie, even at 83.
Well,
That's
if
my
you
aunt.
think so,
Yes, I do. I
you're
do
probably
think so.
blind.
I do think so.
I was born in Soviet Russia
When?
in 1932 in the southern part of the Ukraine, a town called Zaporozhye.
What was it like in Russia at that time?
And well, I was born into a very privileged family.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in Kiev. My mother was a concert pianist. My father was the director of the opera house in Kiev.
Did you have any musical ability?
Yes, I did, but as life turned out, I never really
What was your
developed.
ability?
Well, I sang very well, and I played various musical instruments.
Can you sing for us now?
No. But I must say that our privileged life in the Soviet Union ended in 1937 when my father was arrested during the purges by Stalin. Millions were arrested and vanished from the face of the earth, and my father was executed. My mother died in the United States,
How old was she?
and she died at age 81. She helped us escape the Soviet Union. The war started. We lived in the Ukraine, outside of Kiev, because Kiev was under bombardment, but so was also the little place where we lived. We lived in our dacha, which was really a summer house. We couldn't return to the city. So in 1941, the war started, and my mother spoke several languages, among them German, and she started working for the German army to
Doing
stay
what?
alive. In 1942, we were in Berlin and we got stuck. We lived through the war. We stayed in Berlin. Bombardments were terrible.
What? Tell me what that sounded like.
Well, actually, the worst was in Russia when the Germans advanced and the Russians retreated. We had to hide in the woods, lying on our stomachs for days, because the Russian retreating army burned and killed everything in its way.
And you were hiding in the woods on your
We were
stomach.
hiding in the woods. People didn't have any bunkers
Just
or
your mother
anything.
and the kids.
Just my mother
And your brother or your sister?
my brother and I. Mm-hmm. And one beautiful day in the summer of 1941, we were sitting outside. The bombardment had stopped. My mother was sitting with us outside reading a fairy tale to us. And all of a sudden, we looked up and the whole German army was coming out of the woods.
How'd that make you feel?
Unbelievable.
That scare you?
Unbelievable. And the Germans advanced and the commanding officer stopped and said, Halt. You know, my mother got up and walked towards them and she spoke perfect German. And we realized that the German army was the new occupation where we were. And a few hours later, the bombardment started.
Oh.
And that was the siege of Kiev, which is now the capital, always was the capital of the Ukraine.
How did you live through this?
In the open. It was terrible. I have to add one more thing, that the irony of it all, that after World War II, Germany was divided into 4 zones.
Okay.
Right? The American zone, British, French, and Russian zone. My mother was gone somewhere. She had been living in Berlin, and after the war, we didn't know what was happening with her. She was gone. We were in boarding school. All the children were gone except my brother and I. Since Germany was divided into these 4 zones, we, in that boarding school, just happened to land in the American zone. And the Russian zone was less than a quarter mile away.
Okay.
Had we been in the Russian zone, you can guess what would have happened to
Yeah.
us.
Mm-hmm.
Just by
Safe.
something, by a miracle, we were in
Safe.
the American zone, and that really saved us.
Yeah.
Tell them what you told me about the American soldiers when you first met them.
Oh, the American soldiers were unbelievable. They were wonderful. They were so kind, and especially to us since we were so young, children. Uh, it was a wonderful experience. We would go over to the Russian zone just to look at the Russian soldiers, and it was like night and day. The Russian soldiers with watches up to their shoulders, and just completely, we would look at each other, my brother and I, listen to their language, because by that time, having lived in Germany, we had forgotten our Russian, our mother tongue. We spoke German only.
Right.
I would say to Victor, Victor, do you hear this language? Imagine, we spoke that language. Doesn't it sound funny?
Mm-hmm.
So that was that. And one more thing I have to tell you. Between the boarding school and the Russian zone, as I said, even less than a quarter mile, was a river. And on the other side of the river was the Russian zone. And I swam in that river one day, and on the Russian side, Russian soldiers started shooting at me.
Really?
Yeah. Now, of course, he could have probably hit me, but he didn't. He would shoot ahead of me or on the sides of me. A whole crowd assembled on the American zone. They were all yelling for the Russian soldier to stop. So that was an experience. And that's why I want to say it's amazing that I've lived this long.
Well, Natasha, thank you.
You're so welcome. We're supposed to be for 2 minutes. And I've chatted it away.
And I loved every minute of it.